well. So we are embarking on matter, and I'm going to begin with our land acknowledgement, and then I'm going to just share a little bit with you related to that, because wherever possible, I'm going to try and envelop that just a bit more so that we also tie in some First Nations understandings into our land acknowledgement, but that it fits well with our organizing idea that we're working on as well. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. And really, I won't play this video because we have a couple of them for you, but I encourage you to just to go through the beginning piece of this creation story. It's a very, very relative one that deals with Mother Earth and also fits very well into our concept of matter. And I think it's important that we don't just look at the content of the science, but we envelop wherever possible our First Nations understandings to go into those organizing ideas as well. Okay. Whoops, on that. So it's our hope between the two of us that we are going to be able to do some sharing with you that's going to be of value. And in that, we are basically all starting from scratch in a new curriculum, working our way through. We're also looking at what do we have available to us that I already know? What is it that's completely new to me? And where am I going to find all the resources that I'm going to need perhaps to teach this? So it's that hope that we have confidence, that you have a feeling of direction as we kind of unpack some of the pieces for each of the organizing ideas, and that you have a sense of efficacy, or that you feel like you have the tools necessary. That being said, if we go through something like this and we spark some interest as we're talking, you can feel free to reach out to either one of us at any time. Regardless of whether we're in session or not. And if there's something that we have that we can share with you, we will be more than glad to do that. Or if there's something that we can do a little bit of searching and legwork for you to save you a bit of time. We had some norms that we discussed very much in that first session, but because it's been such a long time, I just want to take a few minutes to just go back over them again. Thank you for being here. I mean, that to us is really important. If you feel comfortable in having your video on, that's even nicer than talking to a box with a name on it, but we also understand if you're multitasking, that's fine, we don't care. If you're having a snack, that's fine too, it's just nice to see a face. But feel free, as we said, just to jump in at any time and ask any questions or share. If you have some expertise in that area that you've tried already and it's gone really well, this is a great time for your colleagues to hear that as well. Okay, so we're going to get started to look at the document. You have a numbered outcomes document. Hopefully you have already downloaded that. I'm going to get Ted to take it over from here, and then he's going to start talking a little bit about how this particular organizing idea will then take us into concepts.
Thanks, Chris. And Chris, or anybody, if you can remind me whether my video zaps on and off or not, or if I'm not making good connection, and I'll move to a different location here. So please let me know somehow if you can't hear me, if it's all jittery. So yeah, the organizing idea in this case is matter. And as you know, the curriculum is organized in such a way that that organizing idea is there across the different grade levels. You'll see matter show up in grade 1 and grade 2 and so on as we take a look in a second. And of course, then with each, like all the other curricula, we have a guiding question, and beneath that guiding question is the learning outcome that we are required to report on. And of course, we've got the old familiar CUSPs. I'm sure you've heard that acronym several times. The knowledge, understanding, and skills and procedures that underlie that learning outcome and provide us with the evidence and the things we need to do with our kids that can help us report on that learning outcome. On the next slide, you'll see that not all the learning outcomes, as Chris was mentioning, not all the organizing ideas, excuse me, are taken in every grade. You can see that things like space is not in kindergarten and doesn't in fact start until grade 4. So with that in mind, for the most part, with matter, energy, earth systems, and computer science, those organizing ideas go across the board. And just one quick note, it shows up once in a while in kindergarten curricula, and that is the use of the words includes and such as. Just as a reminder, when you do see the word include in the one of the cusps, that is something you must be included in your teaching. If you see the phrase such as, those are just exemplars, and you can use those or add your own. And finally, I don't think this shows up much in kindergarten, but if you see a word in parentheses, that's the word that would be technically wanted to be used as we go along here. So if kids are explaining something formally, you want them to use that more the word in the parentheses rather than the less appropriate word. Next slide, please. I'm going to begin with just a little thought because it's easy to do this curriculum as a checklist. Easy to go through things, say, I've done that, my kids know this, they can define this, they can state this. But the danger of doing that is we go through that checklist procedure. And Chris, I'm going to just get you in a sec to play a little video there. This is only a few seconds long. But I think what is very different than what we grew up with. And you can see the example of that robot and how it can actually move with such fluidity and mimic a human being. It's amazing. And this technology is expanding faster and faster. You've probably seen videos have facial features and the skin on them, and their face can make expressions. And you can see that the movements are very fine and very humanoid. We can probably wouldn't be surprised if we see one of those working in restaurants or the service industry in a little while, because we know that those are hit with labor, and robots can certainly be something that takes that place. Our world is very different in the future. And so what is it that we want to instill in our kids to make sure that they have what it's going to take to survive, to contribute, and have a meaningful life in that future? That you probably think about things that are these things, the competencies that have been out for some time. We want our kids to be critical thinkers, creative thinkers. We want them to be collaborative, and those are the skills that will help our students survive in a world in the future that we just had a sneak peek of there. As well, we want our kids to be competent in literacy and numeracy skills, so we can infuse that into our courses as we go along. It's those skills and processes that are going to help them to maneuver through the difficult future that we think may be waiting them, unfortunately. But it could be a bright future when we consider what we can do with our kids. To really unpack the curriculum, there's one idea that you're going to need to understand. Many of you are probably familiar with this idea, but I just want to go through this really quickly, and Chris is going to flash the slides. You've seen this before. It's a concept attainment lesson. I have an idea in mind, and that idea is in the yes category. So all the things in the yes column have something in common. The no column don't have what it takes to be a yes. We've got story, shoe, shovel, and novel, and a no is a non-example of what I have in mind. And I have 4 words at the bottom. I'm going through this very quickly so we can save some time. If you can think of one of the words, see which words fit, you'll notice that courage, character, and truth do fit, because if you go to the next slide, Chris, they are concepts, right? And a concept is just an organizing idea. It's a noun that has distinct attributes, kind of like a file folder. All right, so we have folders that we put things in there, have things all in common. That's essentially what a concept is. So concept of a car or a concept of a truck, we can distinguish between those 2 vehicles because they have different attributes, although there's some shared attributes as well, but there's some distinguishing ones that separate them. We probably see something like this. Some of you may have seen this before in your life, and some of you may have not. I've seen some new cars like that, but what do we call that? And so, you know, that's where we start struggling to get to some of those gray examples. So that's what a concept is. And I wanted to introduce that to you because what I'd like to do is unpack the curriculum by using a conceptual lens. And a conceptual lens means that we're putting a concept in front of what we look at, and we view this image or view something through a concept. And in this particular case, if you take a look at this photo and take a look at through the lens of resources, you might see something like sand, which maybe it could be used for irrigation or playground, or it could be used to make cement. We see the resource of water and we focus on that. But if I was to change that lens and say, look at this picture through the lens of our senses, we get a different idea. And you get the sense of coolness of the water, or the smellness of a lake, or the sounds of waves crashing. And we notice different things. So we take a different lens, our focus changes. And so what I'd like to do is take a look at the curriculum with you through two different lenses, two different conceptual lenses. And the first one is the lens of the concept itself, those nouns and those sort of those ideas that we can focus in on and get a really good understanding what they mean. So here's an example of one of the outcomes, what the outcome with a series of one of the CUSPs, the knowledge, understandings, and skills procedures components. And I'd like you to take a look briefly for a moment to see if you can identify through that conceptual lens of concept. What are the concepts that may pop? Concepts are nouns, they're categories of ideas, and there are examples of those ideas. And we're going to move through quickly. So I'm going to have Chris move on. If you might have picked out some of these, I've highlighted them in red, and you'll see that they're really essentially sort of repeated through the knowledge, understanding of skills and processes. And that's not by really mistake. When we're talking about understanding is taking a knowledge piece and somehow putting it together. And what we can do is through a skill or process, we can demonstrate that. So together, all three things come up. And so what we have to do is pick out those concepts to say, what's really important here? We could see things like natural objects, constructed objects, properties, object, senses. Those are all key things that we need to hone in on for this particular organization idea. But there's some other concepts kind of hidden. I call those skill-related concepts, because we can go to that slide, Chris. Because when you examine something as you can go to the next, as you examine something in, for example, the outcome where children examine properties of natural or constructed objects, really what they're doing is creating an examination of something. Describe something as in skills and procedure. We want them to create a description. If they're describing, they're going to create a description. So we want to know, what is the description at the end of the day? And so we just want to keep those in mind, that the science curricula and all curricula have concepts which are important to that particular larger understanding. Go to the next slide there. And we're going to look at this really quickly now through a different lens. Well, as we know, I guess there are levels of concepts. We know that object is a very broad concept, and we get more specific, such as soap as an object, or bar soap even more specific. The younger the kids are, the more factual the concepts seem, because they're just learning some things and they're building onto their schema. And as we get older, bar soap would just sort of seem like just common knowledge, not necessarily concept. When you think about it, it is, because there are different examples of bar soap as you go along. There are different shapes, sizes, scents, and so on. And all the concepts in this course I've done for you have created a concept map, and that's on the next slide, to give you a better sense of what are all the key ideas in this particular organizing idea. You'll get a copy of that in the resource package that's available to you. But you can see, for example, as teachers, when we look at this, we can say, okay, I see how this works a little bit differently. So some of our senses that we start in the middle include touch, and that is, we get touch from our skin, and the sense of touch senses weight, temperature, and shape and texture. And we can see that shape and texture are also sensed through something from sight. And you can look at this through the variety of ways like that. Those ideas there, not all of them, but for the most part, they're all concepts and help. And I just thought that might be useful to help organize what this unit might look like. So that's looking at the at this organizing idea through the concept of concepts. Now let's take a look at it through the concept of skills and procedures, which are the doing words. And so as we look at the next slide, you'll want to look at it and from the perspective or the focus of what are the doing words? What are the real words that give us those action things that we need to do? And you'll see that they're in the next slide, they're highlighted for you again. So the key to doing this organizing idea is, well, go ahead, Chris, we'll go to that. You can go to that next slide. Right, and so you'll notice that there are the words such as describe, sort, experiment, describe, describing. So there's kind of three things that in this organization is being asked of us: to compare and contrast, to describe, experiment, and perhaps sort. You'll notice the slide before I mentioned the word tips. Well, that's because sometimes you have to read, if you're doing more than one organizing idea, which most of you are, I believe, right, more than one outcome. Sometimes those skills and procedures are verbally tricky, and you have to kind of wade your way through them. And I pulled out sort as an example, because when you sort, you're definitely moving things into groups, but there's two ways you could do that. If you were going to use kids to sort things as a way to demonstrate their understanding of concepts, they're going to know the name of the group, for example, living and non-living things, and they're going to move things into that groups or sort them into those groups based on that characteristics. So that would be more of a classification thing. But you can also sort by just giving kids an arrangement, a whole bunch of things, and have them sort. And then with the groups, and they will give those groups names or category names, such as things that are red, things that are blue, or things that are hot, things that are cold. So just keep in mind when you see that, you could do that in two different ways, because there's two ways to sort. So that's why I said tip number one is be careful of the verb. Tip number two is this. If you can go to the next slide, Chris.
Ted, if you can stay still in front of your machine rather than moving back, because we're losing you, you're getting to be choppy in the sound.
Oh, okay. What I can do is maybe
it's just when you move back, we lose you, and so if you just stay put in one place, then then it works.
Sorry.
No,
I'm trying to catch up on some time. Tip number two, when you're looking at the skills and procedures, to clarify your intention of what you want to do with it. It's tempting to use those as assessments, and they can be, but if you're going to do, you have to sort of just clarify things, because each of those statements are composed of things. You'll see in the purple, it's the doing, and then there's really the content part, right? Those are those concepts that the kids are responsible for. So if we're going to get them to describe the properties of objects using a specific sense, we're going to want to make sure they understand what properties are, objects, in the center. And we want to make sure that they know what it means to describe. What is a description? So we have to kind of be careful and clarify them. What are we going to assess here, or what are we really asking them to do? If we're going to ask them to describe, and we can go into the next slide, or any of those skills, one way we can do that is I've got two things I'm going to quickly flash, not that one just yet, Chris, but if we were to use the idea of description, we'll want to make sure that kids know what a description is first. You could just quickly click onto that, and then I'll just want to show that for a brief moment. This may not be appropriate for kindergarten, but I just want to show of using again that concept attainment of activity of just going through some yes, no things. In this particular case, we're not going to go through each slide, but what I have is a yes. It's a statement that has descriptive statements, and the no doesn't. And after going through the list of them, having the kids say, well, what do all those ones have in common? The slideshow is probably not the most appropriate way to do that. In a kindergarten class, we certainly know that the more visual and the more hands-on, the better. So you may, but I'm just using this as an example of what you may pull in front of the classroom. So there's a series of yes, no's, and then questions, well, what is different about all these things? And then we get the definition of the words that tell our observations about the properties and objects. Now, of course, kids need to know what observations are and properties and objects. So I'm just pulling this out though, as how it's important to make sure the kids understand those concepts before we move on with things.
Mhm.
So if I was going to do is a script, make sure they know what observations are, they want to know what properties are and objects and so on, and all those things. And I'll just touch on that a little bit later again. Anyway, though, what I'm getting at is if we're going to do a skill, we want to make sure they understand what the related idea is. If we're going to describe, we're creating a description. And a description uses those observation words that describe texture and so on. So we can move out of that, Chris, and go back to the slide deck. I'm looking at my time here. I'm doing okay. So
good.
once students know what description is or get a sense of that description, then we can go on, well, how do we do to get kids to describe? There are multiple ways. One way that comes in handy with teaching skills is something that I call the direct instruction approach to teaching. So we can click on that one, Chris. Yeah, the blue one that you were going to, perfect. I'm just going to get you to go to slide 3. And what I have there in slide 3 is if you were planning to do a skills teaching lesson, it's kind of the steps that the teacher would go through. You define the skill clearly for yourself. Every process or skill has steps into it. And maybe we'll go on to the next slide to do, and I'll explain that. So, for example, the skill is describe. Next slide. Really means telling as much as you can about the properties of the observing. And so that includes when I would, when Chris is going to look at you later, when we're observing, we're talking about using all the senses. So really including all the sight, sounds, sense, and so on related to that object. Go ahead, Chris. So one of the first steps is describing it. And so if we're talking to the kids, you observe with your eyes, observe with your hands, observe with your ears, observe with your nose. Again, the cautions, depending on what allergies and medical issues kids have, and the objects actually having the kids work with. Observe with your tongue. And those are basically the 5 steps. And of course, tell me what you see, taste, and so on. And it's those words that use those descriptors is what's providing a description. If we go to the next slide. So those are the steps, but within each steps, like I said, anytime you're doing a skills teaching and you lay out the steps or the procedure about what they're going to do, there's always some concepts. So point 3 and 4 kind of go together. Next slide and next slide. If there are some concepts in those steps, and the slide after that, you want to make sure the kids know. Up one slide to before this one, Chris.
Oh.
Right, I've highlighted those things that if I was going to teach us, that the kids would already know. They know what an observation is, that it means looking at things through different senses. They'll know what size, shape, texture is. Describe if they don't understand what those things are. And Chris is going to show you later a whole lot of activities that are going to be developing a lot of these concepts. And you probably have lots at your disposal as well. So if you see there's the highlight word there, I just, that's okay, Chris, you could stay there. But if you go through this later, it does lead to a link as, and again, another example of a concept attainment lesson with examples, non-examples about what an object is versus something that's not an object. And then you'd model it in front of the kids. So if we could just go to the next slide, Chris. And this is something good teacher, you probably do at kindergarten. I'm not a kindergarten teacher. Kindergarten teachers do pay much more attention to the details, the steps and the procedures and all those things. So if this is repetitive, please bear with me just a little bit longer. So if I was going to say the properties, then I can see, and I would use that word, use those vocabulary, because that's one of the things expected in the science curriculum is that vocabulary is used. the property, or I can sense with my sight or something, and we would go and describe that. So I would go through that with the kids, the properties I can touch and so on. Next slide. Once you model the skill, then that becomes that opportunities for practice. And it can be guided practice at the start and all that kind of stuff that would be naturally using a lot of kids to practice a skill, giving them not mass practice, but intermittent practice so that they can use it and then come back to it, use it, come back to it. That's getting to know the skill at a basic level, but if we really want them to get a deep understanding of it, not only do they practice it, but we can go a step further. Next slide. Oh, that's just again, an example of a slided practice or just a guided practice. I threw an example in there of how you may want to assess a student's description. It's pretty straightforward. You've probably seen something like this before. There's the criteria. Can the student identify things with sight, touch, taste, smell, and so on? With the assessments, what you'll find is if you could do this at the start and get a sort of what the student can do at the start, and then again, do something like this at the end of the unit, you'll get a pretty good assessment of their growth, right? They may not be able to do much of this at the start, but then you'll have that evidence of learning if you do this after you go through these lessons and activities. And we can go on to the next slide. Step 7. When I say it's kind of tricky, but you want to deepen it, you want to now deepen their understanding. They know how to do that, but you see if we can deepen that understanding. And here's an example of what I mean by that. You might want to do an activity such as the following one, where they have something, in this case, because we're doing remotely and it's all digital from afar, you get kids to choose one item of things that may be similar and have it describe it to a friend, not naming what it is, but by just describing it based on the characteristics. And see if your friend can guess which one that you picked just by describing what you sense and so on. So the color is going to be the same, some of the shapes are the same, some of the textures are same and different, but they'll have to do that. And once they do that and they've had a chance to regroup, if we go to the next slide, then the question becomes, to get a deeper understanding, is something like this. So what does this tell you about why it's important to make careful observations about the properties of the objects when you want to make a description? It's a loaded thing, but you have to think about that one carefully and how you present that question. But now they're getting a deeper understanding of the word description, and now it's becoming a deeper. Not only can they do it, but their understanding of description deepens. And description shows up often in kindergarten and grade 1 and grade 2, all the way up. It's describe. It's amazing how often that word is a big part of the K-6 science curriculum. Thanks, Chris. And then the next few steps, I'm not going to go into much detail, but just start reflecting what was easy, what was difficult. Those kinds of things are really helpful when you can talk about the skill for that metacognition and where you're having trouble with it and so on. So that's one way of teaching a thinking skill or procedure. I'm sure you have many up your sleeve, but I thought I'd share this one with you. Approaches up your sleeve, but I thought I would share this one with you. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because you'll notice that on that slide with the skills, I had a reference to surface, deep, and transfer. This may be a reminder for you, but we know that the learning goes through those 3 phases of surface, deep, and transfer. When it comes to learning the surface level of that skill, it was the definition of a description and kind of knowing the steps. And this sort of guided thing, it's very rudimentary, but they know what it is. The deep is when they can start talking about the ideas in that skill and how they're related. Transfer is taking that skill, describing to new situations. They have a transfer one that I'll share with you, as you'll have a link to a little bit later. And Chris is going to go through a lot of these activities that will take kids from surface to deep to transfer. And in order to get to that transfer point, though, the surface is important. They have to know what those items need to know what a property means. They have to know what an observation means in order to be able to go through those 3 phases. And so looking at this slide again, I think this is important because again, if we go to that slide with the robot, that if we want to be ready and move forward to a future that all those competencies are going to be important, we have to be intentional about the instructional approaches we use. You'll see that, for example, I gave an example of 2 surface learning activities, the direct instruction of skill and the concept activity that I did, where what's the relationship between, or I guess choosing all the pink things and deciding one and describing it to someone. That's getting things a little bit deeper. And then we can maybe take that skill of describing into a query or project-based learning activity to help them transfer that. But we don't want to get to that transfer until we have a solid foundation of those concepts and those skills. Next slide, please, Chris. And the important thing is intentionality. So when we're doing an activity with our kids, we want to make sure is where am I at with their learning? It's tempting sometimes if this is a really great thing and the kids are all involved, but it's important for us to know for that activity to be successful, where does it fit on the spectrum? Is there anything that needs to be done at the surface and deep level before I do that activity? And just being intentional and purposeful when we're choosing those learning activities. And there's lots of really good stuff along the internet, and Chris is going to share with you a whole bunch of stuff, and I'll let her do that in just a couple minutes. I've got one more thing I want to add. I just want to show you a planning tool that you have accessible to you if you want to use. This may be handy because what it does is it has all the outcomes for this and cusps for this particular unit all in one spot without having to go to the back and forth to a PDF or cutting and pasting and so on. So what I did was fill this out for you just based on the activities that I did with you with the skill, and you can see that I picked a certain cusps that I was relating to, and I'm talking about the skills teaching thing I did and the concept attainment lesson with description. So you'll see that with drop-down menu, I could pick which ones I was using. There are some critical contents that I didn't click on yet, but that I should do that before it gets sent back to you. In terms of concepts that were important for this section, you'll notice that the concept of description was one of the key concepts. And again, before I went on with that, you'll see the note there. I want to make those things before I get into description, but you could choose any one of those concepts to help focus where you're at with your learning with the kids. Now, if you go down one more, whoopsie, sorry, Chris, we're quite done. Again, so there's skills and processes there, and you'll remember through the activity I took you with, not only was the concept description something I wanted to focus on, but also the process of describing. And so now that I've got those down, if you scroll down, then I've got some learning activity with them. At the surface level, which is at the pink bar, I have a link then to what I wanted to do and where the link was. You'll notice I have a new one there, card sort, develop the concept of description. And something that Chris is going to show you is a PowerPoint resource. If you go to slide number 10, there's another example of a surface learning activity for description. And so you can keep track of where you're at by maybe organizing them this way. If you want to assess their understanding of description or assess something with guidance, I have some sample resources there for description, and I kind of touched on those earlier. When we want to go deeper, within that skills teaching activity slide deck that I showed you with description, there was a deeper learning activity. Chris is going to show you something with comparing and contrasting, which also, again, deepens their understanding of these concepts and these skills as well. And finally, there you want to get onto that activity transfer, or that activity where they transfer. There's project-based learnings and so on. And Chris is going to share with you some examples through the slide decks that she's got coming up with her. So when you come across ideas and examples, I think let's be intentional and see where they fit in the learning process so that we can help our kids move from that solid basic learning to that deeper learning to transferring it into different contexts where they can demonstrate what they really know of this stuff. And that's it. Now for the really good nuggets from Chris.
Oh, yeah, right. Are there any questions up until now? Because I know for some of you, that's the first kind of go at this, that we've done this with you. We keep a very similar profile as we go through each organizing idea. You're going to see similar things, but very tailored to that organizing idea. And the pieces that Ted shares with you at the beginning, especially about the skills, is really, really important, because we're not just assessing content. We have to assess the skill side of it as well in marriage with the content. And so it isn't about us reading a curriculum document and seeing those skill words. They're not just for us. Those are also to be taught to the students. So a kindergarten student is starting, it's the first line of skill learning that will go to grade 1, it's going to go to grade 2 and continue on. So those are really kind of key points that we need to make sure that we're consistent on and carry those through. So we're going to look a little bit at maybe how might I unpack matter. And this is just a sample slide deck that I'm going to share with you of some ideas. And hopefully, if nothing else, it gives you some resources that you could use. Might spark you some ideas. Senses are not new to kindergarten. We have done those before, but we do have a chance now to really unpack it in a different light, and maybe in a more updated light, I guess, from where we were, and looking at it from that perspective. So I'm just going to go to our second slide deck here. And you will have a copy of this in the file. I'll show you that at the end, where to find this, so that you know where your resources are going to be and how you can find it, and all of those pieces that go along with it. Okay, so talking about matter then, and I was quite intentional when I go through this in looking at our numbered curriculum document, our numbered outcomes that we have. I'm really honing in on 1.1 and 1.2. There is a 1.3 and it does live in here, but it's not a standalone, and nor are these standalones. And I guess this is where I'm going to start with you. You'll notice that the arrows go in both directions. So it isn't just about teaching this side, and then once I get that, I'm going to go over here and just do it over here. What hopefully will happen is that as we unpack 1.1 about objects, students are going to share with you their understanding. Students are going to share with you terminology. Students are going to share, and you're just going to record. And we're not going to tell them where that sharing belongs. We're not going to tell them that it's a category. We're not going to tell them it's a sense. But what we want to do is learn what they've given us as terminology over here, so that we can start to integrate the notion of senses over here. It's not a stand up and delivery. And today we're going to talk about what an object is. And did you know that an object can be? We want them to experience some things, and then you ask some open-ended questions about what did you find out, and the words that they share with us is going to be the starting place that we're going to use for their understanding. And different groups will be at different places. We know that. Describe and sort, as Ted has already talked about, these are really kingpins in this particular unit of understanding. And so this is definitely something that we want to do. It's really nice to see the word sort here, because it doesn't really show up properly in the kindergarten math program, but it's nice to know it's living here, and you would do it anyway in math. But this is one place that we can absolutely combine the thinking that happens in math with the thinking that's happening in science. Experimental and critical thinking. Experiment is a word that's in our curriculum too, as one of our design concepts. And if I'm going to experiment, I need an understanding of what it is I'm looking for. I need an understanding of what that means. So again, it's that piece that Ted talked about of how do I get a student to understand what experiment is before I even launch into the knowledge and the factual pieces that I have to learn. So to start with, I would suggest, in order for us to unpack what is an object, so what makes an object an object? I mean, they may have heard the word object before, they may know that they could pick up anything in the room and it would be called an object. But if we just need a starting point, we could simply say to them, you know, what makes an object an object? Can I see it? Can I touch it? That might be a starting point. And then we could just go around here and simply ask them, and they could be working with buddies on the floor. You know, are all of these objects, are these objects, yes or no? And if they're yes, why do you think that they're an object? So again, you're just getting the information from them. You're not going to stand up and tell them which ones are. They're going to have that discussion with them. But what we're leaning towards, obviously, is that we want them to understand that an object is anything that I can actually physically see and touch. That determines what an object is, and it has specific properties. These properties that we've listed here come directly out of your curriculum document. But these are the properties we want them to say to you, not you to say to them. So whatever activities we do, and I have suggestions, and I'm not saying they're the end all be all by any stretch, but whatever activities you do, this is what we're trying to tease out of them. Can they get to some of these words? And they may not know what texture is, but they may describe it in their own language, and that's fine. So we want them to discover and verbalize it to you as we start to make our lists that we're going to use in the classroom. In this process of planning for the new science curriculum, I'm also always on the lookout for what are some resources that you could use, because we don't have resources in our learning tools in the new Learn Alberta at this point, and we don't have any new series, obviously, at this point either. So I've been working with the publishers and asking them to share with me whatever I can find already in my own digging that I think fits with this. Are they willing to share that with us? And so Pearson so graciously has opened their library so that I can go through and find the books right now that are working maybe in other provinces, or in the first place I started was the US and then found out that they're here in Canada. These books like this, these are perfect books. And so I'm going to share a little bit more about those at the end, but I do want you to have some options that if you are needing something, if you're brand new to this and have nothing that you can go on, then this would give you a starting point. If not, and you have stuff in the school, great. I'm just suggesting what books might be a good fit. So let's have them sorted. So in the book that was mentioned here, this is just what it is. It talks about sorting. You could read that beforehand, or personally, I would give them a bunch of cards and I would just say to them in partners or triples, whatever you got them, can you sort these cards? Not telling them how to sort them, nothing. Let them determine what the rule is going to be, how they sorted them. I've given you these cards in our resource file, so you don't have to create them. They're already done for you. You just have to cut them up. And then just let them go to town. And then as they're coming up with their final answers, then we can have that open discussion piece again about, well, how did you sort them? You know, they might say, well, I put everything that looks the same color together, or I put all the things that were food together, or I put all the things that were instruments or made sound together, whatever. So they can come up with their ideas and their descriptors, and we start making our list with the intent of using that list at some point to pull it apart again and say, so this list that we made, how did we get color? We see color. Okay, we don't feel color, but we see color. So we can start to build those words that they gave us into the breakdown of senses. And I haven't even brought that up to them yet, but they'll use that language on their own anyway. So creating a word chart for them to start with and just add it. Every time somebody comes up with a new word that would be realistic, that we could also slide into the senses, let's just keep adding until we get a chart that we can really start to break down and look at the senses. I would also ask them, you know, is there another way that you could take your cards and sort them so that they don't believe that this is the one all be all? After they've heard other students and groups how they sorted them, what would they do with theirs? So how else could they be sorted? Let them take a second shot at it and resort them now that we've heard a few things, or read the story to them. And now, did that change their mind about how they would resort them? The story will take them into sweets and things like that. So they're already going to start to think about food or taste or those types of things without getting into the senses. Can you find items in the room? What about the things that they saw? These are just pictures. Could I find things in the room that were on these pictures or that look close to what's on the picture? Can you go find 10 of them that you can now physically put them in front and then ask them again? Could you sort them? How did you sort them? Because now they've got something physically to hold on to, so they could say, well, this was smooth. They couldn't say that before with a picture, but they can now with an object in their hand. So we're just refining and tooling up each of their descriptive language. Sort them again. Can you sort them another way? Can you do them a different way? Can you use the words that are on the wall to come up with a new sorting pattern? And now we want to use those words that they've created to say, you said this was smooth. So how did you come up with smooth? Oh, because you were holding it, you touched it. So now we can start to bring those terms of the senses into the picture, and we can start to build some of those words together. It'll be really important that we just don't stand and deliver what that looks like. It's easy to do, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to stick when I need to go and find something on my own. So the more you let me do it on my own first, the better it is. This other little book that they had was called Tell Me About It. And when I went through the whole thing, I'm just showing you snippets right now, but it had great comparative language about rough and smooth and big and small and ridged and no ridges. Like, it was just wonderful for descriptive and comparative language, which again is part of their curriculum. There's lots of such as's in your curriculum in this topic, but there's lots of includes too. So we have flexibility. It's such a packed to outcome curriculum because everything you do is a concept, and you don't have time to teach a day on every concept. That's just not going to happen. So we need to really kind of unpack it and make it quite manageable, and yet spend the time on the senses that we need to. The other part about this booklet is it has some really hands-on do sciences, which is really very nice to see to go along with the senses. How do properties affect the design of something? So you said this was small, this was big, this had sharp corners, this was round. So how does the description that you gave me affect how you can and cannot build something? So again, these are just sample ideas, but again, we would let them go grab whatever's in the room and say, can you find things that have different properties, different shapes, different whatever, they're different. And how can we create a design with those? So you might have those wooden blocks and they know that some things are round, don't have things that balance on them well. But there's also these stacking rocks. I don't know if you've seen them before. I put them in a link in there just in case you haven't seen them, but they're just stones, but they're carved with some flat sides, round sides. And again, it's what can I stack and what can't I stack, and what prohibits me from going in different directions, and how can I make it more spread out, and what do I need for stability, all those types of things. Or just sort of plastic stem building blocks. Anything else you have in your room would work. I mean, that's really what we're getting. How does what you have as a property that you describe affect what you can do when you want to build a design? So in this particular one here, I'm going to play just a few seconds of it. I'm not going to do the whole thing. But again, this is an opportunity, if you haven't really laid out senses on the board, and I probably wouldn't personally at this point yet, I still would have just grouped their words with them. This is an opportunity for them now to think about a song that's related to senses. And the whole goal will be, can you even remember the 5 that you hear? Okay, I'm not going to play the whole thing. I'm just going to do a little bit.
I have 2 eyes so I can see, and a nose to smell. I have 10 fingers that can touch. They do it very well. I have 2 ears so I can hear the birds up in the trees. I have a tongue inside my mouth to taste the food I eat.
Okay, and then it just repeats. And so now it's my opportunity to let them listen. And can they remember what those words are? Can they remember what they heard, what they saw? What were the 5 things that helped them to see things and to feel things and to touch things? So eventually what we come up with is our 5 senses. And ideally, it's going to be important that we spend at least a day on each one of those senses really deeply, giving them every possible opportunity to experience it in a variety of different ways, inside, outside, with different kinds of objects that you have in the room. Because at some point, I want them to be thinking deeper, and I want them to be able to take the knowledge they have and transfer it to a situation where they have to combine all of those. And if any one of these is an odd man out and I don't get it, it's pretty hard for me to transfer the 5 together because there's a gap, right? So as I unpack them, whatever order, it wouldn't matter, whatever works best for you, we're going to add things to it so that we have discriminating words that they can start to associate with each of the senses. And do some of the words show up more than once? Of course they do. Yeah, there's going to be lots where they're going to be able to overlap. So students would benefit from really having a dedicated day where they are really, really engrossed in each one of those and unpacking it in a really deep way. Some of the words that we might have, I can take them from my word chart that we created, and now we're going to create a senses chart. And we're going to see that those words that I was describing for objects actually are quite related to my senses because I needed my senses to actually have those words. That's how I came up with them to begin with. So what are some things I can do for words I can use for sight, touch, smell, hearing? These are just ideas. They're definitely not an end all be all, for sure not. So now what you might want to do is say, let's go back to the cards that I gave you. Now that we've kind of tooled up those 5 senses, I'm going to give you header cards so they each have a card on them which describes one of the senses. And now we're going to ask you to resort the cards that we started with at the very beginning. And where will you put some of those cards? And what you would hope to hear, we don't want to say it to them, but what we would hope to hear is, well, I think some of these could go in more than one place. And that's great, because now we're really thinking about what that sense does and what opportunities it provides to me. If I don't hear that, then I will ask that question, because this is where we want to go. We want them to realize our senses give us information in conjunction with each other. They're not isolated. We don't ever just see, we don't ever just hear. They always work together. So what are some possible extensions of just doing senses together? You could do a sensory walk, and I've just given you links up here. When you get the slide, you can see there's links in here. I did not download this. I'm not saying these are the end all, but if we're just looking for a variety, if I need some sensories, I can get all kinds of feel and touch, and then descriptors that go with that. Remember, describe was one of my key skills. I need to be able to describe what it feels like when I step from beads into water or beads into Jello, like if you really want to have some fun with them, or put shaving cream in. We did that with kindergartens once. We just filled the tub with shaving cream. It's a mess, I get it, but it's fun. They have a lot of fun with it. Going on a scavenger hunt outside, right? There was an idea in here, and I thought it was a great idea because, again, I'm going to see something different than my friend does. So we might find something similar, but maybe not the same. And it doesn't matter if there's snow on the ground. They still can see, anything that's outside in the schoolyard. They can still see trees. They can still see fences. Anything that they can give a description of. Or build your own sort of textured book, or can you see? I Spy. Put a whole bunch of objects in there, and with a partner, they get to play I Spy. I spy something that's blue, right? And then they have to give a descriptor as they go along. That's an easy one. And that's a great center activity that they can do. A touch book, a feely bag, like any one of those. And I'm sure I'm not sharing anything that you wouldn't already know. Blindfold somebody and have a shoebox full of items in there where they have to reach in and describe it, but they don't get to see it. So what are they going to use for descriptive language, the vocabulary that we're looking for? When we talk about going a little bit deeper, and depending on what you've done with them already, this could be deeper. It could also be transfer. If you've done a lot of work with them, I might say to them, could you go home and bring back a toy or an object that you will be able to stand in front of the class and describe how all 5 senses were used to describe this object. So that's a great transfer activity for them, because now they really have to dig in their toolbox and know what objects are, what properties of those objects are, how did I describe them, what's my vocabulary, what did each the sense give me out of that vocabulary. Or go outside. don't bring it from home. Go outside and find an object, and maybe they work with a partner. Find an object that you could use all 5 senses to describe. Again, it doesn't have to be big, but those would be great transfer activities for kindergarten, because now I need to know that I'm able to take those pieces and really apply them. I've also included in here, again, I like to use books in between days. So when I come back before I start something, I might read another story just to refresh their memory, get them thinking about what we've been doing. I found some read alouds that might be helpful if you don't have any books on this. This is just a link to 25 different activities that I could do for senses. So again, if I'm finding that their vocabulary isn't really good, they can tell me that this is touch, and they can tell me that I used my eyes for this, but their vocabulary is lacking. They might need more activities and just exposure. These are just ideas. They're, again, not the end all be all. Another book that was very helpful in this series when I was looking at it was Looking Up. We don't do space. It's not one of our organizing ideas for kindergarten, but that doesn't mean that I couldn't use my senses to go outside and feel air, that I could see the stars, and that I could make connections with my 5 senses in looking up and what do I see in the sky and how do I describe it. On this particular slide deck, I provided you with, some people might call them worksheets. I just call them formative assessment, because a worksheet isn't an assessment that's summative, it's just formative. It tells me you got it or you don't. Like, that's really what it's telling me. And so every one of these that you click on will be different versions of using something with the 5 senses, whether it's a matching, whether it's a draw the line to it, whether it's a story that they're going to do or a coloring combination. This one here is actually a bit of an interactive that you can look at. Oh, I'll have to fix that link. Sorry, that link should take you directly to, and I'll fix that up right away. But it has an interactive, it's a quiz, but it's an interactive. Which sense would you use for the following? Not opposed to just matching a line with a picture. So which sense would you lose? If you've never subscribed to ReadWorks.org and you've never seen it before, it's free to get it. But what it does is it offers you stories at a level of any child's reading ability. And if you teach multiple grades, then you also have the ability, if you have a child who's, let's say, in grade 2, but reading at a kindergarten level or just learning, you can tailor the same assignment directly to that child's reading ability. So it's a really nice little tool that they have, and it's all free. That's the nice thing for teachers. The other piece that we can offer to students, and they're in kindergarten, that does not mean that they can't do this. What about once I'm really good at knowing my senses, how about if I now show you that I can tell you where certain things might lie if you're doing a card sort, or maybe you gave me a bunch of objects. Which ones can I really only do with sight? Which ones could I really only do with touch? But which ones actually could be done with sight and touch? And that would go back to that card sort where a child says to you, I don't know which one to put it in because it fits into more than one. A Venn diagram is one of the highest order thinking skills that graphic organizers that we can put in front of a child, because it requires me to know at least 2 concepts and to draw some conclusion about similarities and differences between them. So if you can throw a Venn diagram, and it doesn't have to be like this, it can be 2 hula hoops on the floor is great, especially if you've got the card sorts. Put the word inside and then let them figure out what goes in the middle, or give them 3. I can guarantee you that you're going to have some kindergarten children that are ready for 3, because some of their pictures fit into more than 2. They fit into 3. So let them just play with that and see what they come up with, and let them talk to you about why they put it there. That's the best kind of assessment that we could ever get from a student. One of the other little books that was in there was What Does a Scientist See? Now, I know we don't do the scientific method per se in kindergarten, but it's really hard to have the word experiment in one of the activities that you're supposed to unpack as a skill and not have some idea of what the questions are. What is it that I would look at as a scientist, see, think, and ask? Like, why would I do that when I'm doing the experiment? It's because I saw something, I'm thinking about it, I'm asking a question and now I want to test to see whether it's going to work. That's my experiment. And so this is a neat little book. It would work well for kindergarten right through to grade 2, as far as I'm concerned. But it just offers us a couple of different ways that we could maybe nudge a little bit of that idea of the scientific method, or just how would I frame an activity to answer a question in science with a kindergarten student. This is another resource. Now, some of you might already own this. The current curriculum that we have right now had already been bound by a publisher here in Alberta, and it's been in stores forever. Education Station had it and whatever. This is part of that book, and you can get it now online if you just wanted the one on senses, because remember, this is now moved from grade 1 to kindergarten. So you can still access this. It's great. It has all the lesson in it. It has lots of materials in it. Again, it's got some ideas for differentiation, and it's really well done. They had some really good graphics in there so kids can really relate to the senses that we're going to do. And you can download it now. You don't have to necessarily go to the store and buy it. This is another one that I've given you. Again, these links are in here, so you can always download them if this is something you would want. But this, maybe that's the summative that we have as a class. Maybe we now have a conversation and we put a big picture in here and we say, let's look at that picture. And where do you think we would have things that we would that would involve our hearing? Or where do you see we have things that would involve taste, right? The taste is the tough one. Taste will actually, and smell, because we've got to watch the allergies. We would want them to experience some things like an apple and a pickle, and so that they understand the differences in taste. But we have to be careful, obviously, of the allergy pieces that go along with it. So that book from the grade 1, the resource for what we used to use, is from On the Mark Press. And this is where I found it because I was looking for it. There is another version of this as well. This is lesson plan just for senses. There's another one that says 4 lesson plans, and those 4 lesson plans actually fit the other areas that we're working on in kindergarten too. So if you wanted to pick up more than one in one booklet, you can do that as a download. Small books, these are the ones that I just showed you from Pearson. So just so that you know, if that's something that you need in your classroom library, this is a place that we could go. If you are interested in any of those books, just send me an email at any time, and I can connect you with whoever it would be that would talk to you about that. But when I was and I've been hounding, I'll be honest, they don't want to hear from me anymore because they're probably saying, who is this woman? Like, leave us alone with science. But there's nothing in there and I want something that you have some resources to go to. And so Pearson has been kind enough to also share, they said, if any of the teachers wanted to have access, so where I got those little 4 books, they have what they call Spark Library. And Spark Library houses like math and science. It has all their books, I think, in it. I'm only just going through science. That's all I'm looking at. But they said there's a 30-day free trial. If there's a teacher that wants it, they're welcome to have it. So I put the link in here. But if there's a book that you want, you're welcome to just connect with me, and I'll show you who it is that you need to connect with. But I thought that was kind of neat because that would give you a chance to go in and see what books are there available that maybe you don't have in your classroom. And if that's what you want, then that would give you some tools. So here's our email addresses. If you don't already have them, they'll be on the slide deck. So if you missed them now, not to worry, you'll always have access to it. I just want to take us back to our original slide deck just to finish off here. Are there any questions, any thoughts, any comments about, is that helpful to you for resources? Like, we just need some feedback too, because if this doesn't work and this is not what you were hoping for in the session, then you just need to tell us. Like, we'll absolutely switch gears and change whatever you need. So feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to use the chat box, whatever works for you. We are open to suggestions, and definitely you're not going to hurt my feelings by saying, no, I don't want any of that stuff. That doesn't work for me. So what happens now is the recording will go into the folder, and my slide deck as well. So the one that has the resources on it will go directly in there as well. So you'll have a version of it. You'll be able to go in and harness any of those links. And then what will also happen is you will have another set of folders in there which give you extra resources that we put in, some of the things that Ted shared with you, will be in there too. So we always will build those. I will show you where I'm going to find those in just a second. If you have anything that you've already done in kindergarten and you're willing to share it with other kindergarten teachers, we will put it into the kindergarten shared folder so that anybody can access it. So if you do have things that you're willing to share, send them to me by all means, and we will put them in there. Maybe just tell me what organizing idea that you're sending me if it's not matter, like if it's not something that we have talked about already, just so I know, and I'll put it in there. Gizmos is another thing you may or may not be aware of, but Gizmos are like interactive worksheets. They've been around for years. We had them paid for years and they were gone. Now the government has gone back and paid for the license again for kindergarten to grade 6 in math and science. So you can access those now. But if you have never used them before, or we are suggesting that you do it through the Gizmo website, which is Explore Learning. They are also posted on the New Learn Alberta site, but they're just posted one at a time. When we go through the Explore Learning site, they're all put together so that you can start to pick and choose the ones that you want fairly quickly. So if you are interested in going to the Explore Learning site, there are a number of different activities that are going to be, sessions that are going to be presented in January. We just finished 6 or 7 or 8 of them now. And what the Gizmos did is they just put a whole bunch of them after school. Every week for January, there's going to be 2 in English, 1 in French. So if you have French immersion teachers in your school, what they'll do at that session is show you, first of all, give you a login and a password so that you can get in. They'll show you around the site, and then you're free to go. You can do whatever you want with it, go in there as much as you want, grab as many as you want. There's no cost to any of that. Okay, so let me just take you to the website. I just want to make sure that everybody knows where to find the resources. So you are going to moving, and that's not the site I want. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, well, let's just do it. All right, so we're going to go to the Moving Forward website, movingforwardcurriculum.ca. It's all one word. I'll put it in the chat box so that you have it. You probably already have a login, because if you had registered with us, then you received 2 emails. One was the confirmation that you registered with the session, and then the other one is that you have a welcome email saying, welcome to the Moving Forward, here's your login, here's your password. Okay, it's in the chat box. If you haven't been there before, just grab that link. Okay, and what you have is you're going to go to the cohort group, and in the cohort group, you'll find science, math. LA will be there shortly as well. But this is where you'll go to science and go to kindergarten. And what you'll have then is, here's session number 3, November 1. It's empty right now, but by tomorrow in the evening, probably at the latest, Jordan will have posted everything to that, and you will see what it looks like. I'm just going to show you a different grade here, because then you'll get a sense of what will be in your folder. So you'll have the recording. And then anything that's a download, these are like your miniature files. Not everything that's below that's downloadable has been covered in the presentation. So we often will add things in there that we don't have time to go through, but they're there that might be useful to you. You don't have to race in here and download everything, because it's not going anywhere. It's not going to close at the end of the year. It's there in perpetuity. And you can go in and out as many times as you want and download whenever you want. So it's not like you have to race into that. It's not a big deal. So all the card sorts that I was talking about are here. The planning document that Ted was talking about is there as well. So these are the kinds of things you'll see underneath your recording in kindergarten. So they will start building now as we do more of the sessions. Are there any questions about the website? If you haven't gone through the website and sort of explored things, Anything under additional provincial resources, again, I would go in and have a look. If you're got some kids that need some interventions, they're there. If you are looking for some math support for terminology, this is where you want to come. If you're looking for a parent, maybe a leaflet or something that you can share with parents saying, hey, this is kind of a brief overview of what we're going to do in math or LA. We don't have them done for science yet. Go ahead and grab it. You don't have to use it. It's just there. We created math kits for kindergarten to grade 3. So if you wanted to have a sense of what might a kit include if a child was going to have one, not again that you have to, just there if you want it. And then the French immersion. If you have French immersion in your schools, everything that we're doing over here in science, math, and LA are being translated from English into French. So the French immersion teachers will have equivalents as well. So again, you can tell French immersion teachers to come to this site. They don't have to be logged into a cohort session at all. They can just go here, sign up, get a login, and go, and they'll find their stuff. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing at that point. So are there any questions at all? Any comments? Does this help? I guess that's what we're looking for. Is this a good start for you for kindergarten? Or I know that senses aren't new to you, but I just want to get a sense of this is where you were hoping it's going to go, or use something else that you want. Okay. And you're very quiet. Wow. Okay. Not to worry. I'm going to